Hello, Abigail here with the astrology and tarot energy reading for the full moon in Scorpio. This full moon is on the 12th, and it feels, at least to me, very much like the actual kickoff of being able to physically accomplish things in 2025. I feel like up until now, we've been dealing with residual energy from 2024. Also, if you follow gosh words, if you follow the zodiacal calendar, we don't really get into the new year until Aries season. So it is very much us finishing up that last zodiacal year. All of those retrogrades that we had at that point entering into Aries season. And so it finally feels, I think it was kind of cracked open with the new moon in Taurus, but I think this full moon is that final ability to kind of release all of the stuff we've been holding on to and all of the things that have been really, kind of pulling us back. Especially with the fact that entering into Aries season with eclipse season, and especially since, like, not only did we go into Aries season to eclipse season, but we, like, the day we entered into Aries season was eclipse season because of that, eclipse in Pisces season before. So we kind of came into the new year under the cover of eclipse darkness, if you will. And so now it feels like that curtain is finally being lifted. I think a lot of astrologers are sensing, especially moving into June, where we have Jupiter ingressing into Cancer, that a lot of stuff is going to lighten a bit and feel a little more free. So to me, it feels like this full moon is really kind of that turning of the key, especially since it is opposing Uranus with that Sun conjunction with Uranus and Taurus. It's really prevalent. Also, the ruler of this moon is Mars, and it's in trine to Venus. So we also have this really nice and spicy fire energy between the two great sky lovers. So it's a really beautiful moment, I think, of both kind of radically changing in a bit of a messy way and dealing with the detriment energy of a Scorpio moon, while also getting this really spicy, energizing fire trine that's like, it's go time, folks. I will point out that that Venus is still in the post retrograde shadow stuff, so it is kind of go in the context of the Venus retrograde. So we're still offloading and understanding and digesting those themes. However, Mars is finally like, yeah, we're out of that Mars retrograde officially. Let's get going. Let's move forward. Let's progress. And it creates a really interesting dynamic with this full moon. There's kind of like a bit of a crazy vibe going on. I don't use the word crazy, but kind of like unstable Uranian, let's shake things up vibe. Especially since this is the last Sun conjunction in Taurus. This is the last time the moon, in its fullness, will be opposed to Taurus Uranus. So it is really exciting. I don't know if I said the time. It's at 12:56 p.m. EST time. So nice midday Monday full moon for some of us. But yeah, it's also, interestingly enough, uh, it's kind of out of orb for me with a sextile with Saturn, but because that sextile is with Uranus, the degree of Uranus at 26 degrees, the moon is at 22 degrees, and I want to say Saturn is at 28 degrees. So I feel like it kind of pulls it in. And so there is an element of Saturn coming in and being like, want to do something new? I might feel like helping. Especially with, the energy of Saturn moving into Aries very soon. I think it's the 25th of May. So we're getting there. But it is this kind of radical shift and change with Saturn support. And then kind of by default, we get kind of that North Node is still adjacent to Saturn as well. So there's this really, really progressive energy, but I don't think it's in a way that any of us are going to expect. I don't know that it's not going to feel easy or simple, and it's not going to be obvious, I think, at first what's going on. But there is a lot of possibility to kind of make room for the change that we desire. I don't know that we're going to get that change in on this full moon. I think we're going to be clearing out to make space for what the summer months specifically have to bring for us, which honestly, pretty exciting. And Gemini season's not that far away. And so that kind of chaos right before summer energy is, I think, going to be really helpful with us moving forward and moving into this very new season. We have so many outer planets moving this year. We had, you know, Pluto moved earlier. Saturn's about to move. Jupiter's about to move. Uranus is about to move. Neptune just moved. So, even earlier this year when I was meditating on the year ahead, it really felt like this year is a year of shedding, not exactly like putting down roots per se, unless your roots be wild. But it really feels like our ability to kind of start working in the context of this year is happening on this full moon. The things that we're able to release and to let go of and to see clearly for what they are, because we do also have functioning at the same time a Mercury square Pluto, and they're not adjacent by degree, but it does kind of give this whole day a day of kind of like pulling back the curtain and seeing how things actually are. And I said this in my, week ahead video. I don't think it's like everyone's been lying for sure, but it is still maybe not everyone has been aware of the information that they have, or maybe not everyone has been comfortable enough to share who they are. And so we're going to get to really get to know people on this full moon. And those who are willing to change and those who are ready for change, it's going to be very obvious. And those who are still struggling or have no interest in change or transformation are going to be painfully obvious. And the people who are struggling, kudos to them, because we've all been in that place and some of us still are. But, those who refuse to change no matter what, farewell, fools. So yeah, it's exciting. It's going to be difficult. I'm already feeling the pull. Yesterday, the moon was conjunct the south node, and they're the lunar nodes. They're the nodes of the moon, and so I already feel like we're kind of approaching this energy of release, and I'm already feeling. I'm not quite a puddle yet, but I feel like by the time I hit Monday, I'm going to be a puddle. I'm like, something's coming. This full moon is bringing something in, something I'm going to have to face. And I'm not quite sure what it is yet, but it's coming down the pipes. And it's not to like, doom and gloom or, make people afraid of this, what's coming on this full moon, but I don't think we're going to know till we know. And it's going to be tricky because you're going to feel it building through the weekend. You're going to be like, if this isn't resolved, if we are not able to work on this, if I can't get this affirmation, then things are going to be a little nasty. And I'm going to be struggling. And the person I'm dealing with or the people I'm dealing with are going to be struggling. And I think a lot is going to come out with the full moon. A lot of people's actual capacity and ability to exist in the situations and the relationships they're in right now. It's going to be obvious who's able to function and who's not. If you're struggling with burnout, this full moon is going to be like, oh, you still have burnout. We still need to back up and we need to help you get more rest and create more situations where things are better for you. I also did the full moon horoscopes with B. Brit over at the Zine Witch. She has a Patreon if you want to see something that's like more sign for sign. But yeah, when I did those, a lot of kind of like, especially when things were hitting like 7th, 8th house, 8th house, 3rd house, 11th house, other people-y things. Like if these people aren't ready for the transformation and growth that you're ready for, you are going to have a conversation about your ability to stay in relationship with each other. It's going to get harder and harder as this year progresses and those outer planet shift signs to maintain relationships with people who refuse to change or who are desperately holding on to systems and relationships that are dead. Something really comes to mind if you were someone who has a lot of people who refuse to see you as an adult. Like they're constantly being like, oh, when you were a kid, you did XYZ, or when we were together in college, you did this. And they're constantly bringing up the past almost to put you down. It doesn't really happen to me, but it happens to a lot of people I know. Then this is the moment to be like, excuse me, I am the same person, but different. I'm not a 12-year-old anymore. I'm not, the person I was in college. So you need to treat me like that. And I am curious to know why you keep bringing up past stuff that makes me uncomfortable. So yeah, it's a really great opportunity to do things differently. I do think that if you don't do things differently after this point, things are going to get really uncomfortable until you do change. And the cards, quite interesting. I really like them. Usually when I'm shuffling, I'll get flashed by a card, and then I don't know what it is, but I will then pull that card. And this is what this cute little Seven of Cups was doing. Sorry, I'm trying to figure out my camera setup. So, Seven of Cups, I love this deck. It is the Way Home Tarot. It doesn't come with a guidebook. I've actually never found the need for it to have a guidebook, but I will say if you're just starting out and you feel uncomfortable, maybe wait a little bit. However, it is not a bad thing to read tarot just based off of the images and not have to look at a guidebook all the time. I'll just say that. So with the Seven of Cups, with this BB, um, things are not as they seem, which I said already. Things are going to be a bit unclear. It's not going to be, none of your decisions are going to be as simple as like, oh, that's the obvious correct choice. No, that's not happening. We're not getting obvious correct choices, unfortunately. So, and I love this kind of like weird, try to get it in focus. Come here, focus. Sorry, I'm trying a new camera setup and there we go. I love the kind of weird fever dream cup vibes here. It's really cool. Nothing's as it seems. Things are kind of an illusion to a certain degree until they're not. And then you're like, oh, wow, kind of shocked and surprised that that's actually how things are. And so, just knowing that not everything's as it seemed and waiting a little bit because, like I said, not only do we have this full moon that's really going to be illuminating the stuff that hasn't been obvious, we got that square with Pluto that's going to be like, oh, so they weren't actually functioning as themselves. They've been hiding parts of themselves, either from fear or an inability to like understand themselves. And now you're dealing with the real person, and that's not easy. So be prepared for that kind of like whoosh revelation when Pluto and Mercury pull off the cloth everything's been hiding under, and you're like, oh, that's what this thing actually looks like. Now I get to deal with that. And then we have this really beautimous little ace of swords. And I love that it looks like a pen almost, like the tip of the sword looks like a nib. Like it is a sword, but it almost looks like you could draw with it. And it feels like we are going to, after we know how things are and we see how things are, we get to actually write a new narrative and a new story that matches reality and is an honest retelling of our experience and our thoughts and our encounters with self and with the world around us. It's also the time to really shed old outworn beliefs. The Venus retrograde definitely shook those things down out of the rafters, out of the basements, and brought them to light. And now it's our chance to let them know and let them go and write new stories. Um, especially if you're from the US or any Western country, we are deeply propagandized. If you have learned anything new about society, if you have been enlightened on disability rights or the conflicts that are happening around the world, and conflicts is a really loose, neutral term that I don't really like, but you get what I'm saying. You now get to make different decisions based on what you know, and you don't need to feel guilty or shameful about not knowing because you were propagandized. But now we get to change. Now we get to do different things, and this moon is going to create that space that we need, and I'm really excited for it. And I love this because even though this moment, well, actually I won't say that because we do have the Venus trine. This moon is very relational. This moon is very much, and I love this card. It's got these two little upside down little jellyfishies. And it really does feel as though our relationships are in high relief right now, that they're being put into really tight focus. And we're like, wow, that is what the relationship is. Good, bad, difficult, easy parts, all of those things are here. And you really get to ask yourself what you want. And if these relationships are enough for you, if as they are, you can continue to persevere and to enjoy and to participate in these relationships. And it's also going to really tell you how much other people are participating, because it takes two to tango. And if one partner is willing to change and grow and accommodate and another partner isn't, unfortunately, that is just how it is. And you have to face the consequences for that Like, you may not be able to remain romantic partners. You may not be able to remain friends. And I'm not saying, scrap everyone but after Venus retrograde, there's usually a house cleaning. And we usually do really find out who the people who are in our corner and whose corners we are in. Um, so, pay attention to that. Have honest conversations. Talk about how you really feel. This is not the moment to soften things. Obviously, be kind. And I also don't believe truth hurts. I think truth can be told um, in an unsanitized, kind way. It can be raw, it can be painful, but it doesn't have to be mean. I think it's the truth hurts is literally just a phrase made up by people who like being mean, but are also self righteous and don't want their pride hurt, and also refuse to take consequences of their decisions and actions. Um, but yeah, it's about coming to relationship with honesty. This can also be a kid. I don't always talk about kid relationships because um in some of them, like, obviously you are the adult and you need to act like one. It's not your child's responsibility to respond positively to the astrology, but in this situation, maybe it's a moment to come to a kid who's getting closer to the full flush of adulthood, or is moving into a stage where they're starting to face adult topics, things that they're going to have to deal with the rest of their lives. And this is their introduction. This week is a great week to have those conversations, whether it is a talk about consent or a talk about the future and what they want and the world that they live in. It's not an easy conversation, but it is time to give your child some autonomy and to give them the tools of that autonomy. And that autonomy includes, understanding what informed consent is and what consent is, and understanding how the world works and, what they deserve, and how they deserve to be treated. Sorry if you hear my dog choking in the background. He has a collapsed trachea. Um, and like what they can expect in relationships. And that also includes you modeling a relationship type where your child is treated the way they deserve. Um, and that's something I'm not a parent, I'll say that, but I've been a nanny for a while and I know it's not the same, but something that I constantly worked on with the kids that I worked with was treating them as an equal. Like, obviously I'm in charge of stuff and they can't do whatever they want. That would be crazy and we would probably all die. But treating them and their feelings like they have value. This is a great moon for that with kids. Moving on. Then we have the devil. And I love this card because it's like a little haunted carnival. It is a moment to do things differently. This is very Uranian. Obviously, the devil card is often more associated with, I'm pretty sure it's Capricorn. But in the context of this card and the way I've always felt about this card and this deck, it's very Uranian. It's about doing something you've never done before. It's about being a bit subversive and alternative and doing things that maybe don't make sense to other people. It's also about having fun in circumstances that suck. I watched a video on TikTok and I cannot remember his name. I'm so bad with names, but it's a creator I found recently, and he's got a really great way of breaking down like the consequences of colonialism. And something he said today was, joy, we've lost the joy in rebellion. And this is this card. You need to enjoy rebelling. One of the greatest pastimes of people in the earlier 19th century and and like all of the 1800s was rebelling, was saying no to the status quo. Unfortunately, if we start to look at, like, conversely what my ancestors were doing in the global south, no, that wasn't a pastime that we were encouraging. And, you know, a lot of horrible things happened, but they were still resisting. The story of the global south and of the global majority has been resistance. And I hate to say it, but now the white people are having to resist. We're taking the fun out of it. And we don't know how to have joy and also have pain. I think it's also a propaganda, dynamic where they're like, if you're not completely happy, you're never happy. Buy more stuff. That's not the point. You don't have to be, no one is ever completely happy, but we need to have joy. We need to have joy and resistance. We need to enjoy the telling the powers that be no. We need to enjoy being ungovernable. We need to enjoy saying F the patriarchy and down with misogyny and racism and hatred, and up queerness and power to people who live between the norm. And that is what the devil is. The devil is finding that joy. It's finding that joy in the resistance of just living, in doing laundry, and, making spaces that are welcoming and invigorating for us and the people we care about. So dig into being countercultural, dig into decolonizing yourself. And it's not easy, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter. It's something we need to do. And we need to do it not just for ourselves, but for our ancestors, who many of which decided to continue to participate in violence. Um, but yeah, it's time to enjoy what we get to enjoy in the age that we're living in. Yes, times are hard. Yes, maybe it would have been easier to be born in a different time period. Doesn't matter. We are here now, and we get to enjoy and to resist in new and unhinged ways. And that's a very detriment, behavior. And then we have this beautiful High Priestess card, which I love. It's so moody and elegant, and it has that open third eye and kind of the crescent moons that look like closed eyes. There's a lot of deep spiritual fodder in this moment. There's a deep feeding that can take place in this moon. There's a lot of depth to be found. Some places are dark and scary, but some of them are deep and magical. And sometimes they're both. Some are deep and magical and dark and scary. So I want to encourage you to really allow this moon to take you deeper. Allow this lunation to take you to the depths, to take you into places that you never imagined you would go. And to find the gems and the gifts and the things in that depth and darkness. It really reminds me of the fact that the card of this year is the card of Virgo, which is the Hermit. We're all on a journey in the dark together, and we can reach out and hold hands, but we still can't see. And we're finding gifts, and it's not hard, and it feels long, and it can feel lonely. But sometimes that quiet is the only way and the only space that we're going to find ourselves in. And we're going to find the strength and the stamina to resist, to have equitable relationships, to make difficult choices, to write new narratives. And I find it funny. I'm not going to talk too much about this because we're done. But the card underneath it and the card underneath that, and I honestly could keep going. We do a whole read with this deck, are the Chariot and the Magician. The Chariot has been coming up so much for me when people are asked, like, when are things going to change? And I really do think it's going to be Cancer season, because the Chariot is the Cancer card. But there's so much potential coming up, and there's so much joy to be had within the midst of this chaos and frustration and feeling that so many things are slipping away. So resist and be the magician and create something new and magical in the chaos, as the Tower card of this deck flashes me underneath the Four of Swords. In the chaos of it all, be brave and courageous. And doesn't mean you don't get to cry and you don't get to have really bad moments and you don't get to hate everything. But it means that when you have moments of expansion, that you feel joy and that you participate. And this moon is releasing a bunch of gunk, and it's going to clear up space for us to have that celebration. So, be ready for a pretty watershed moment. I always hate it because I'm like, oh, that lunation was so hard. And everyone's like, I felt nothing. But if you're like me, really sensitive, get hit between the eyes every time the universe does something, be ready for this one to be hard. Be ready for it to be a watershed moment where there's a lot of release. It's not easy to kind of manage the intensity of that flow, but it is creating space for some really beautiful stuff. And in this, there are the tools for change. In this, there is the tools to like shift the dynamic and to change the way we think about stuff and to bring new and fresh ideas into this world. Anyways, my loves, that is my reading for the full moon in Scorpio. Please like and subscribe if you appreciate my work. Feel free to comment, ask questions. You can also ask for topics if you're interested in anything. If I can't answer it, I will just tell you. If I can, I'll make a video about it. But anyways, blessed full moon in Scorpio, and I'll see you in a different space and time.